If you dissolve bullshit, the mission becomes clear. The mission is there. Your sense of action is there. Your leadership automatically emerges when you clear your mind of distraction. Depression is clinically described by psychologists as a chemical imbalance. That's their label for it. That's what they prescribe the drugs against, which is fine. I have nothing against drugs. They serve a purpose. But if you look at the neurobiology and the neurochemistry behind depression, it's driven by perception, ultimately. So the question in human behavior is, what are the behavioral predispositions to depression? What are the contexts and the trigger behaviors that lead to that depression? Depression is a byproduct of comparing your life against a fantasy that doesn't exist. So any individual who compares their current reality to a perceived fantasy being very specifically defined as a potential future or life where there are more benefits than drawbacks in a specific set of ideas. You have some life experience or a collection of life experiences where you're challenged by an outside authority, challenged by a woman, challenged by someone you're addicted to or infatuated with. What happens is that challenge then creates a cycle of you believing you're missing something. And anytime someone believes they're missing something, they project into their mind a fantasy of a life where they had what they think is missing. And then that life where they have what they think is missing is rose-colored with life would be easier, life would be better, life would be simpler, life would be funner, life would be all that stuff. Ask yourself daily, what am I comparing my life to? And try to get as specific as possible about what that fantasy is, that image you have. When you compare your life, when you're feeling depressed, when you're upset, when you're anxious, when you're angry, when you're feeling betrayed, when you're feeling self-criticizing, all of those emotions come up. Stop in that moment and ask, what am I fantasizing life would be better if? You have to take that fantasy, which is colored with too many benefits, and you have to get real honest with yourself and ask, okay, let's say that fantasy were to come true. What would be the drawbacks? It's just about bringing your perception back into balance. That life is never without pleasure and pain, up and down, benefit, drawback. The cycle is always preserved. And if you compare against a one-sided fantasy, you'll never live up. Your current reality, which is always going to have pleasure and pain, will never live up to the fantasy of a life with more pleasure than pain. It's impossible. But our whole culture is built on that hedonistic kind of idea. Here's another way to say it. Lots of people say, I want lots of money, right? Lots of people are like, I want $1 million. But how many people are equipped to deal with the responsibility and accountability that comes with having $1 million? Another way to say that would be, are they prepared for the downsides of having money? Or are they only addicted to the good sides of having it? Because what happens is, as you know, lottery winners win the money. And they often end up with less money than they had before they won it. And that's because they weren't equipped and prepared to handle the drawbacks of the experience they said they wanted. You can't ever have an experience of pleasure without pain, and that there's always both sides, but in order to live in and have an experience, our mind has a function where it ignores half of it. We oscillate. The universe is built on an oscillation. So instead of seeing the photon, which is an entangled magnetic unit which includes a positive and a negative dipole, the mind, the minute you look at a photon, turns it into a wave function, and you generally only look at either the positive side of the wave function or the negative side of the wave function. So the mind is designed biologically to essentially separate the inseparable. Buddha says the cause of human suffering is trying to obtain the unobtainable, a positive without a negative, and avoid the unavoidable, negative without a positive. Buddha is saying there's always both. So if you write on a piece of paper, current reality, fantasy reality, and just go pros, cons, the mission is all 4 columns should be the same length. If they're not the same length, consciously, unconsciously, your perceived imbalances are running you. That's the principle. And so by not consciously balancing those lists, the universe brings you experiences and people and shit, and through time, the lists become balanced. It's just faster to sit down and fucking balance it yourself. Lots of people will spend time trying to focus on becoming better. which in my opinion is a total waste. You will become better automatically if you clear yourself of the bullshit that's running you. And anything that's running you is simply an imbalanced perception of some kind generated in your whole experience of life. And every time we dissolve one of those imbalanced perceptions, you get clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer, and then eventually you wake up and you're like, I know what to do today. And so anytime somebody supports you and you're infatuated with them and they're helping you and encouraging you and over supporting your values, you have a compulsion to like put them in your mouth. But if someone pushes your buttons and challenges your values and fucking triggers you and pisses you off, what do you want to do? Fucking get away from me. You create space. Those are biologies, and that's an animal nature. The human nature, the higher minded nature, is love. Love meaning there's nothing to forgive, there's nothing to forget. There's simply gratitude for what was and a sense of action towards meaning. And true love, not infatuated, thank you for supporting my values and I expect you to be that way forever now love. I mean true love, true gratitude, true unconditional acceptance means to be without condition, which means to be without an ion, which means to be without an expectation for them to be one way over the other. And you can't have unconditional love until you truly see and embrace the expression of both sides and recognize that both are necessary.